Hello everyone. I recently got a comment asking what could have been done to balance Vampyr. To do that, I'm going to bring up an older game called Vampire the Masquerade Redemption. I've done this before and I've been asked, what does Vampire the Masquerade Redemption have to do with any of this? It's very simple. Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, I think, is a shining example to any vampire game in the future. Sure, it's an older game, and it has an outdated graphic system. Combat system is archaic, but the one thing they did right was the overall game. The story was in depth and had a lot to it. The game story spans 1,000 years. When I say that, people think it's a long game. Not really. I would say it's a medium length game, lasting perhaps 30 hours at best. So think about that. 1,000 years of story between two main characters and maybe one or two other people. That is a lot of story to go through. That is the kind of in-depth stuff that I miss. The ability to take something so massive, but compact it in such a way that you're not being rushed through it, and you have plenty of time to enjoy it. Then the other things too with Vampire the Masquerade Redemption is the overall impact that disciplines and equipment had in the game. The great thing about Vampire the Masquerade Redemption is that it was such a simple game to a point where you could understand the mechanics of the game. There was no hidden mechanics. Everything you needed to know was given to you either in the discipline description or the character sheet. Each piece of equipment or discipline did something for you, and we're going to go through that piece by piece. This is the list of disciplines over on the right-hand side. I think two of these discipline trees were multiplayer only, not single player. I'd have to do more research. But overall, look at this long list. Animalism, Auspex, Blood Magic, Blood Rituals, Common, Dementation, Dominate, Faith wasn't a thing, Hands of Destruction, Lures of Flame, Mortis, I don't remember Numia being in single player, Obfuscate, I don't remember that one being in single player either, Physical Presence, Protein, Serpentis. That is a long list of disciplines, which gives you the ability to customize your character how you want to. The main character could be a melee person with some buffs, or it could be a full-on caster. You had that flexibility. If you went full caster, everything did something for you. This right here is the example I want to use, Theft of Vitae. Unlike Vampyr, you actually had a discipline or skill, whatever you want to call it, that got you blood. So you didn't have to rely on a dagger to get your blood. You could just use a skill for it. It does not do any damage, true, but in Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, there's a bit of a difference with this. In Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, everything had a blood pool. If that blood pool was drained, they died. So while Theft of Vitae did not do damage directly, it did kill a person if, or monster, if the blood pool was drained. That's how much of an impact skills had. Even something like this, that's more of a support skill, or I used to say utility, it still did something. It could still kill something. Now, to kind of show you just the level of customization that I'm referring to, this is the common tree, which is one of the longest. Look how many skills are in this just this one tree. All of this. And you even had more utility skills under here. Here's Awaken. You could revive a vampire in your party. You could use Walk the Abyss to go back to your sanctuary. So there is a lot of things that you could do with this game. It's just a matter of how you wanted to do it. Yeah, Cloak of Shadows. Okay, to even further the point of how much impact the skills had in the game, let's go ahead and talk about Hands of Destruction tree. In Vampire the Masquerade, under your character sheet, you had a humanity bar. You lost humanity anytime that you made an evil decision or killed somebody that was either a civilian or story related. Well, actually kill or harm. But point is that once you drop to a certain amount of humanity, you became more of a monster. Kind of like how Vampyr has it, but in a different way. So if you dropped it all the way down to 25 humanity, you could use Turn to Dust, which causes aggravated damage on touch target. This is what I mean by you could become a caster if you wanted to. This all here is casting stuff, just like Lure of Flames. This is an insanely powerful casting tree, but only the main character could unlock this and keep it. So it was limited to one person. That was the balance to this. With disciplines now talked about, I want to flip over to the armor. This shows you the interaction between disciplines and also the depth of what I was talking about earlier. The game was divided into two main sections, I guess you can say, with chapters in each one. You had the medieval period and the modern period. During the medieval period, you had access to plate mail, which was the best for that period. You also had access to the heart shield. This goes to show how in-depth the game was with combat. We just saw how much the game went in with disciplines. This is now showing how in-depth the combat was. The heart shield has stake protection. That's right, stakes actually could paralyze vampires in this game. It wasn't very long, but it still could happen. The heart shield was designed to protect against that. That right there should give you an idea as to what combat was like. Now, let me see if I can flip over to find plate mail for you. Okay, so your character sheet had four main soaks, which is your defense. They were lethal, bashing, aggravated, and faith. There was actually armor in the game that protected you against faith damage, but you had to be an evil person to do that because your humanity had to be pretty low. For people who didn't want to bring their humanity low, you could wear plate mail instead. Um, the opposite would be unholy plate mail. You will notice that its lethal soak was 80, its bashing soak is 30, aggravated soak is 30. The things that did aggravated damage in the game were a relic sword, your claws, and certain spells. So you could potentially take a ton of damage in the medieval period because of the access to plate mail, full helms, and all that other stuff. That was part of the game difficulty. In Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, there was not a toggleable difficulty rating. The difficulty was built in. So during the medieval period, you had high resistances to melee disciplines and other things. So it was more of a easier chapter or period. But if you flip over to the modern period, you'll notice that the lethal soak went down, bashing soak went up, and aggravated soak stayed relatively the same. That's because in the medieval period, or I'm sorry, the modern period, guns were more of a threat than swords. Although there were still werewolves, vampires, and other things that could potentially do a ton of aggravated damage. So in the modern period, you had to worry about that stuff more so than you did in the medieval period. That was the shift in difficulty, essentially. That's how it was built in. And it's because now you have new threats to worry about, and you had to take them more seriously than you did prior. It wasn't a walk in the park like it was in the first period. So there's that. And to finish this off, I'll go ahead and point out that there was um, different slots. You had chest, gloves, helmet, jewelry, and shield. So you had a lot of slots to work with to customize your character. Now let's bring this back to Vampyr. In Vampyr, a lot of the skills really didn't have that much of an impact. Once you got good at the game, you didn't really need heal. Syringes could do way more than your built-in vampire heal could have. The melee and blood resistance on every single monster made claws or blood spear or the ultimate that did blood damage basically useless. Abyss and the other shadow skill were the only ones that actually mattered after a certain point. When you used all that, then you went right to melee. That's all you did. There was no real customization to it, and realistically, there was not any meaningful impact. So they could have changed that. They could have done something like Vampire the Masquerade Redemption did to a certain extent, where you had skill trees or something of that nature, something that was in depth, because two branches for a skill really isn't that in depth. They could have done a lot more with that. Perhaps they could have implemented some sort of humanity meter equivalent, like Vampire the Masquerade Redemption had. They could have named it something else, or they could have just done a number system. I don't know. Take your pick, but let's just say, for instance, that they did do that. Well, if you become more monster than human, then perhaps the bonus would be that you got more to your disciplines. So let's say, for example, that claws does 720 damage. Well, if you went full monster, now claws do 2,000 damage, somewhere around there, 1,000 to 2,000 damage. Something like that would have had meaningful impact. And let's look at the other side of the coin. Let's say you decided to stay more human. Perhaps the bonus could have been more minimum melee damage because you choose to stay human, so you stay more in contact with the logical doctor side of Reed. As a doctor, you know where the arteries are and other things, so more minimum melee damage would make sense, right? So yeah, you could have done something like that because there was a lot of weapons in the game that were really good with raw damage, but the raw damage only meant one thing. In order for it to truly mean something, it had to be able to land all of that raw damage. That's something to think about. Perhaps you could have done more than that as well. Maybe for both systems, you could have given free level ups to certain skills. So, for example, if you became more monster, you automatically got free level ups to bite. If you stayed more human, you got level ups to um, your medical bag, ammo pouch, or something. I think that right there would have provided um, meaningful impact as well as character customization that was not available. I don't know, just some things to think about. It's the most I have. Thanks for listening.